The main character was betrayed by his classmates, nearly fell to his death, eaten by monsters, and the only light at the end of the harsh tunnel was a horny 1,000-year-old lowly vampire. Hear me out. The story starts off with our main character, Nagumo, alone in a dark cave with fierce monsters several levels ahead of him. It's a situation where the weak are only prey for the strong, and Nagumo, being the weakest, was definitely about to be monster snacked. Helpless in his current situation, Nagumo tries to run away but gets his arms sliced up and eaten by the gorilla monster. He uses earthbending to open a hole behind him while trying to do some more earthbending to block the monster. But all these are useless to the monster, and our main character, Nagumo, gets sliced up and dies. Or at least that's what he thought, but by some miracle, he's still alive due to a healing crystal. Remembering how helpless he was in the face of real power, and how he almost died, broke him to tears. It is here that we start to see how everything went down. Nagumo was part of a dungeon party, but obviously, he was weak, even compared to his peers, and had to be saved by a guy called Managawa who effortlessly defeated the monster. One of the girls in the party spotted a crystal which was explained that they were popularly used for engagement rings. Before the guy who seems to be the instructor finishes his explanation, one of the cocky members to impress the girls went and torched the crystal and activates a trap that brings their party to a room filled with many high-level monsters. The party begins getting attacked, so a knight casts a barrier that gets easily broken. Nagumo plays the hero this time and uses his earthbending to form a wall from the bridge and tells them to escape. After buying the party time to escape, it was his turn to escape, so the party members fire shots at the monster for him to run. While doing so, one of the magic attacks changed direction and struck him, which led to his current situation. He realizes that someone must have betrayed him as the bull comes down and destroys the bridge around them, so he falls into the abyss below. Before going to the dungeon, the initial girl who was concerned for him, Kaori, came to warn Nagumo not to go cause of the precognition she had about him. But he tells her to just save him if anything happens, since she's a priest. Unfortunately for him, that is not gonna happen. While Nagumo's mind begins to break due to all the things he's been through, it's revealed that this is an ice guy, and he and the rest of his classmates were brought to the world to protect it. But he decides he's not just going to let himself die helplessly, and would do anything to survive and go home. Anything in the way of this is his enemy. Nagumo sees a wolf in the distance that tries to add him to its diet, but it gets caught in his trap and is buried alive, and the roles are reversed, as this time, he's the one doing the eating. I wonder if it tastes like chicken. While trying to eat the monster meat, he starts feeling unimaginable pain. His hair turns white and he passes out. He wakes up again, probably thanks to the holy water, with a mutated body which makes him look like a badass. His new body and hair weren't the only thing that changed, as he realized that his stats had all increased too. That's not all, he also gets access to his victim's ability while drastically improving his earth transmutation skill, meaning that his earthbending skills double and he can now do purple Chidori, a super cheat ability. All it takes is just eating raw monster meat, having your guts explode, and being brought almost to the point of death. Nagumo uses all his knowledge and channels America to make guns along with some bullets. He tests it on Bugs Bunny and brings it back to eat so he can gain its abilities. As long as it's a monster he hasn't eaten before, his stats increase dramatically. He finally decided it was time to hand out karma to the gorilla who ate his hand. The bear uses Fury Swipe, that's what I'll call it, but he dodges and jumps in the air to aim like a stormtrooper and gets knocked down. Nagumo throws a flash grenade to block its sight, and then does the most petty revenge. Shoots the monster's hand and eats the monster's hand in front of him.
Now listen here, you little.
The gorilla dashes at him but gets the shock of his life, leaving Nagumo to blow its mind quite literally. Nothing beats the disgusting taste of revenge. He gets up and decides to leave the labyrinth. While Nagumo is enjoying his gourmet, he realizes that eating the same monster isn't increasing his stats, so he has to figure out a way out. He realizes that he can't climb up, so he tries to go down to find another route. Nagumo encounters a lizard that petrified his lamp and part of his arm, at least what's left of it. The lizard was then given the full Call of Duty treatment, and he goes off stacking up his stats by killing off rear monsters. On the surface, it's revealed that after Nagumo fell into the abyss, Kaori tried to jump in after him, but she was knocked out and her friend Shizuku brought her back. The king got the news and placed a gag order on the event so the citizens wouldn't know that a precious hero died. Shizuku goes outside to practice as she reminisces about when they were first summoned here. The Pope told them about a war between humans and demons. But when demons learned to control monsters, they wiped out the majority of humanity, so they were forced to summon heroes. Amanagawa sort of assumed the role of the leader, and was the one who encouraged the other students to be the heroes, although the teacher was heavily against it. As she continues to practice, she notices that her classmate is acting nervous and goes over to question him, but he leaves. While having enough evidence to suspect he was probably the one who caused Nagumo's fall, she dismisses the idea as ridiculous and she continues. Later that night, she returns over to Kaori, who awakens from her long sleep. She asks for Nagumo, but Shizuku tells her that he's in heaven. Best Girl tries to go find him, so Shizuku embraces her while she grieves for her loss. Meanwhile, in the abyss, Nagumo finds a door, but he has no idea how to open it. He tries to transmute it, but the door blows him off and summons two Cyclops to fight him. He gets a bullseye on one, but the same trick doesn't work on the other. Nagumo continues to pew-pew at the Cyclops until its shield breaks, so it attacks him, but Nagumo takes him out James Bond style. On the surface, Kaori tells Shizuku that she's not going to give up and believes Nagumo is dead, so she would get stronger. Shizuku agrees to do so too, so both of them would go back down to rescue him. He, on the other hand, finds some balls in the monsters and places them inside the door so it can be opened. He goes inside and finds a cube that reveals a lowly-looking girl trapped. Bro could probably sense a court case coming and decides,
well, gotta go.
She begs him to release her because she didn't do anything wrong. She was betrayed by someone. Of course, this resonates with our main character who was recently betrayed, so he goes back. She explains that she is an unkillable vampire that protected her people, but one day her uncle overthrew her and sealed her in this abyss. Since she's a vampire, all's good. He decides to transmute her prison and breaks the seal to free the vampire Loli. She embraces his arms and asks him to name her, so he chooses to call her Yue because she reminds him of the moon. Spikes suddenly come from the wall, so he takes one for the team to save the immortal vampire. He pulls out the spikes and looks up to see a scorpion. He puts Yue on his back and starts blasting while dodging its poison, then throws a flash grenade so he can reload. He uses Quick Step to take the high ground and blasts him, but it does no damage. He lands on the ground where the lawsuit comes off his back and begins to suck out his fluid. Bro needed some privacy while she carries on the act, so he kept an earth wall around them. As soon as she was done, she goes towards the scorpion and unleashes the sun-like attack to crush the monster, but it isn't enough to take it down. Nagumo asks her to do it once more and runs off to distract it. She drops another one so Nagumo can go above it to solve the problem the American way. He realizes she must be at least 300 years old since all the vampires were eradicated 300 years ago, so he's not gonna catch a case. He begins to take out the crab meat while Yue reveals that the labyrinths were created by the messengers of gods who rebelled against their masters. So Nagumo decides to try and find one to help them escape. He creates a railgun from the monster's loot box. She proceeded to ask him about himself and how he got there, which he told her as they continued to journey below, which was enough to make her break into tears. He tells her that he plans to get stronger and one day go home, but Yue says she no longer has anywhere to return to, so he offers to bring her to his home when he goes back. I wonder if Japan would understand if he tells them she's an immortal vampire. That's why she looks like a loli. They hear a rumbling in the distance and begin to run away from a herd of T-Rexets, but the flowers are controlling them. He escapes into a crack and goes to look for the mastermind behind the flowers. Meanwhile, the lowly vampire uses him as a snack every time she feels like it. He sees an entrance to a cave and runs through the tight hole, then fills it up. They see pollens flying through the air, so he puts up a wall around them but notices that Yue is now being controlled by the flowers. Hesitant to shoot her, he decided to run from her, but the pollen still hits him. A very thick vegan walks towards Nagumo and holds the unkillable vampire hostage. She spawns a flower on his head but is surprised to see it does not affect him, so she uses Yui to fight. Yue tells Nagumo to shoot and remembers that Yui is immortal, so he takes the shot anyway and disarms the creature, then blows the thick flower lady's mind. Apparently, the thick flower wasn't the only one whose mind was blown, as Yue was shocked that he seriously took the shot. He tells her that he knows he won't miss, and besides, she can't be killed, which she isn't too happy about. They set up camp where he offers to give her food, but she comes over to him and decides that she wants to feed on something else.
No.
Still getting away? It's time to eat.
Our duo finds a staircase that leads to the lower levels of the dungeon and begins to travel through unknown territory until they find a door. They enter the room and find it covered with pillars along with another door at the end. A giant circle appears in the center of the room and spawns a Hydra, the boss of the dungeon. It uses many different elemental magic on them, but they dodge and begin to serve it some nice magic and bullet combo. The Whitehead does every gamer's nightmare and heals all their damage. Yue launches a fireball at the Whitehead, but the yellow takes one for the team. The black one goes in front of her and uses Genjutsu, So Nagumo goes over to blast the monster and brings her behind a wall while he stuns them with his classic flashbang. He feeds her with a potion to bring her back, but she's been traumatized. Nagumo decides to willingly catch a court case and tells her that they will survive and go home together. Yue goes over to summon a storm to distract the monster, so Nagumo can get close enough to charge his gun and give 3 of the Hydra heads an outer body experience. The other 3 come forth, but Yue casts an ability to give them a shocking surprise. Nagumo begins going over to her, but White gets back up and decides to use Hyper Beam on the immortal vampire. Nagumo takes one for the team and collapses on the floor. While Nagumo is in serious need of medical help, the Hydra launches another attack, but she uses a shield to protect them from the shower of death and drags him to cover. She gives him a potion in the most normal way possible, and takes his pew-pew to run toward the monster in a desperate attempt to fight the monster. She jumps over its attack and pews him in the face, but White uses another hyper beam to blast her away. She crawls over for the weapon while the monster decides to fire at the immortal vampire, but Nagumo saves her from taking no damage and tells Yue to stop crying. During the touching moment, Nagumo notices that the attacks feel slower than before, but Yue tells him that they aren't. It's just that our boy leveled up from Yue's healing method. He told her to suck out his blood to bring back her magic. Turns out that it was because of the bond he shares with Yue and the thought of losing her that gave him a power-up. He runs at the monster and begins pewing the ceiling, then throws grenades inside. He dodges its attack and detonates the boomers to bring the ceiling down on the Hydra and traps it under the rubble. Yue takes this chance to unleash the blue sun-like attack and give the creature a one-way ticket to hell. Nagumo collapses from exhaustion, so she goes over and lies beside him as the doors finally open. On the surface, the Pope decided he was going to send the students back out to the dungeons again, which the teacher was strongly against. She threatened to stop using her skills on the farm if he did, probably due to how important her skills are. He reluctantly suggested that only the ones who want to go would be free to do so, knowing full well the young ones could be easily manipulated. The teacher, knowing there is very little she can do, has no choice but to agree, vowing to herself that she would do better so another tragedy like Nagumo doesn't happen again. Kaori and the others were on the same floor where the incident happened, still feeling guilty for not saving Nagumo. Benagawa, the self-proclaimed leader, instead of feeling part responsible, told Kaori to forget about Nagumo and move on. Nagumo awakens and is caught in 4K. No lawyer would be able to get him out of this one. He gently wakes her up, and she explains that after the door opens, she carries him inside and begins to dress his wounds.
Okay, what's with the lip licking? What'd you do while I was sleeping? Stop that, it's really freaking me out!
They steal the fallen angel's stuff and begin wandering around the ruins until they come upon a loot box in a chair. Nagumo walks across a circle and activates a spell that brings forth the recording of the Ghost Maverick. He congratulates them on surviving the trials and passes all the truth of the world into his mind, where he realizes that the fallen angels were actually doing good, but he doesn't care and just wants to go home. He reveals that he has learned ancient magic, so he now has access to creative mode. They bury the angel and discover a spell to take them to the surface. But Yue shows him that if they continue to conquer the labyrinth, they could find a way to return to his home. They decided to stay there for a while to learn as much as they could about the world and other labyrinths to better their chances. While Nagumo decides to have a bath, Yue is hellbent on making sure Bro has no chance of beating the case by adding more incriminating evidence against him.
No one, forget it, I'm out of here!
I don't think so.
Hey! No! Hold on!
Months later, Nagumo built a new arm followed by some new toys and means of transportation. He also figured since he was in deep already with no chance of escaping allegations, he might as well put a ring on it. Our favorite duo goes to the teleportation circle, realizing with everything they know and their powers, they might have the entire world against them, and vow that as long as they both have each other's back, they will be fine and leave to begin a new journey on the surface. Meanwhile, the adventurers go back to the bridge where Nagumo fell into the abyss. A magic circle begins to spawn as the bull comes forth, but this time they will not run because they have gotten stronger. Amanagawa uses Getsuga Tenshu to cause the bull to charge, but Jimbro steps forward to hold it down while the knight attacks its horns, just causing a small crack, so Shizuku shows him how it's done. Kaori shows that she's also grown strong by preventing them from getting fall damage. While Amanagawa goes in for a launch attack, the monster attacks back, Kaori preventing him from taking damage. The monster jumps at them, so they cast a barrier. The barrier caster was struggling, but Kaori's support magic comes in clutch to help push it back to make Amanagawa finish it off with his final attack. Kaori is the MVP in my opinion. They begin to celebrate, but Kaori still seems to be unhappy. Back on the surface, a certain rabbit girl with questionable fashion sense. Shay waits for someone, but a T-Rex with an extra head begins to chase her. The furry climbs away as a portal channels to summon Nagumo and Yui to her location. Turns out they were the ones that she was waiting for, so she runs towards them and sticks the landing, but they choose to ignore her.
Could you really abandon me like that? A beautiful young damsel in distress!
Someone thinks highly of herself.
Embarrassing.
The very special T-Rex roars at them, so Nagumo deals with the T-Rex with ease. He teaches the bunny girl to respect personal space.
I can't believe you hit me again! I'm a lady! A beautiful young lady!
How can you say this crap with a straight face? Especially in front of Yue, who's 100 times hotter than you!
The bunny girl is ready for all the smoke and dishes her own.
Look at her chest! It's as flat as a boy's! Any last words before you die?
They allow her to explain that her people are about to be wiped out by monsters, and reveal that she has the ability to see into the future. He summons his vroom vroom, at first hesitant, but is convinced by Yue to help them since she would prove useful later on, so they head towards the furry tribe. Nagumo decides that he will use her as bait so he can no-scope all the monsters, then gently introduces her to the floor. Shay shows them her tribe and travels with them until they find another furry tribe that peacefully accepts them into their village. The tribe asks Nagumo to train them to become stronger, but they have no idea how to fight and are distracted by any little thing. Nagumo tells them they're gonna become a monster's delicacy if they don't turn into alphas. Shay trains with Yue and distracts her with trees to sneak behind her for an ambush, but Yue dodges and shows her why she's the main. Although she did manage to scratch Yue's chick a bit, which is a feat on its own. She goes over to Nagumo and boasts about her progress.
You know, it's not often you meet someone with both beauty and brawn.
Right.
She asks to join their party and reveals that she's fallen in love with him and wants to join his harem. Well, since he's into vampire loli, adding a fairy tag won't make things worse. The furries came back but are now back alley thugs. They take him to the great tree where he sees a pillar. He places the ring inside and is told to come back once he has gained the 4 labyrinth relics. He decides to leave the beastmen, so they beg him to join his party. But he tells them to train so when he returns they're strong enough to join him. There is a small flashback to Shay's depressing past, but her mother encourages her that she's going to meet people in the future who are as different as she is. Then they leave the forest, carrying the thick bunny girl along with them. Our party searches for the entrance of a labyrinth, but Shay feels the need to water the rocks and accidentally finds the opening. But they don't know how to get in, until Shay trips inside the hidden entrance. The labyrinth master scares the fluid out of Shay, and she then decides to have her revenge by smashing the stone the master was using to communicate. They walk through the labyrinth and encounter an Indiana Jones trap that deactivates magic, so Nagumo and Shay takes care of it. They walk through many rooms with traps that our favorite bunny takes care of. Most of the traps were more mischievous than deadly, but in the end, they find themselves back at the start. There was a brief scene where the other students who weren't suited for battle were discussing their next action, since their teacher was leaving. One of the girls decided to go with the teacher and try and protect her instead of staying around doing nothing. Nagumo and the party were wandering around until they encountered the final room. They decide to send in Shay as cannon fodder to test the waters. She goes in as the armor begins moving, so they begin destroying everything until they reach the door. Shay gently knocks to open the door, so they can escape the armor, but they encounter a fallen angel. She asks why he wants to conquer her labyrinth, so he tells her that he just wants to go home. The angels decide not to help them, so Nagumo shows her the light, allowing She to break her arms so he can introduce some lead to her chest. The angel rises again and drops Legos on them. Nagumo dodges the attacks while holding his harem and attacks her from behind. He grapples with the angel and knocks her to the floor so Yue can freeze her in place. Nagumo uses a device to penetrate her with a rod, but it isn't deep enough, so Shay comes in to push it deeper and destroys her core. Yue gives Shay a good girl pat. The robot turns on and warns them that if they learn all the ancient magic, they will become the enemies of God and pass on to another world, and wish them good luck. Our party enters the final door and is surprised to find the angel still alive. Shay goes over and hands out punishment. Then they enter the circle and learn gravity magic. She did say both Nagumo and Shay don't have the proper affinity for it, so it would be best suited for Yue. She hands Nagumo her ring, but he goes over to kindly request that she gives him all her shit. After getting robbed, the angel flushes them down her toilet, but on her way down, Shay sees a fugly snubby fish that scared her.
What are you looking at?
They arrive on the land. but Shay drinks some water, so Nagumo goes over and tries to give her CPR. Seeing her chance, Shay tried to risk it all and do an activity that would definitely get us on YouTube's bad side until Nagumo finds the strength to push the horny furry off of him. They go to an inn and try to get a room, but Shay and Yue begins arguing about who should sleep with Nagumo. Then she shouts in front of everyone that she wants Nagumo to be the first to clap her cheeks.
Bruh.
So he decides to bust a few rounds in her. The next day, they meet with the guildmaster. He gives them a mission to rescue a noble son who went missing in the mountains. And after a little extortion, Nagumo accepts. He rides his Batmobile and begins to get excited about stopping by a village to eat some rice. At the village, Nagumo's teacher and classmates work on the farm. They decide to take a break and have some lunch when Nagumo with his harem suddenly walks in. The teacher immediately recognizes the voice, gets up and goes over to meet her student. He tries to leave, but she won't let him. He had no choice but to actually acknowledge that he's the same Nagumo, so he starts eating while ignoring all her questions. While she was doing 1,000 questions, she finally asked about the two girls. Both Yue and Shay say they were his lovers, but our Chad denies that he's into furry. But Shay claimed he took her first and won't even acknowledge that she's in his harem.
Well, there's only one thing to do when a student misbehaves. Lecture time! You've got a lot to learn!
The teacher gets upset when he wasn't answering her questions seriously, so the knight comes over boost about his rank and scolds them for eating with a furry and couldn't take the fact that Yue called him small. Then tried to test our John Wick and finds out why you don't bring a sword to a gunfight.
You won't be getting another warning.
Nagumo tells his class to forget that they ever found him and threatens to isekai anyone else who gets in his way. He begins cheering up Shay. Yue reveals his deepest secret and says that he pets Shay's ears while she sleeps. They get up and leave the teacher at the restaurant, not before she vows to bring him back home. While she was in her room, she's both excited that Nagumo is still alive and frustrated with his new attitude. Then declared she would bring back Nagumo, but Nagumo already sneaked into her room and wanted to have a chat with her privately. They sit down and he decides to tell her the truth of this world. Long ago in the Age of War, a group of people found out that their god was just using them as entertainment. So they tried to overthrow him. But the god turned the people against them, so they were massacred, forcing the few who remained to create labyrinths and give whoever overcame their trials knowledge and power. She questions if he'll fight God, but he refuses because he just wants to return home. The teacher tells him that Corey always believed he was alive. He warns the teacher to tell her to watch their backs because there is an imposter among them who tried to send him to heaven. Our boy's party sets out on his adventure and sees the teacher is gathered with her students to join them. He tells her no, but she says that after this adventure they will leave him alone. He summons the jeep and goes off into the mountain. They exit the harem carrier, where Nagumo sends out drones that scatter into the forest and finds a battlefield filled with many broken weapons. They travel up the mountain until they find a waterfall. Yue pulls off a Moses so they can enter and find the missing noble inside. Nagumo finds the noble and gently wakes him up. The noble was telling the story, but the noble begins freaking out because a dragon one-shotted his party. The noble was feeling guilty for being the only one left alive, but Nagumo embraces him and says he shouldn't blame himself for being the only one alive, but continue living on while remembering the sacrifice the others made. They exit the cave, but Nagumo senses a danger and a sudden wind blows them away. The dragon appears in front of them and uses solar beams, so Nagumo summons a shield to tank the attack. He begins to struggle, but his classmates comes in clutch to hold it off. Yue uses gravity magic to knock it down so Shay can give it a pounding. The dragon gets back up and uses tail whip on Shay, then shoots a blast towards the noble, forcing Yue to play defense. The classmates tried to be useful for once and attack, but it doesn't even pose a threat to the dragon. The dragon charges another hyper beam, so Nagumo counters with his really big gun to match its attack and knock it down. He goes on the creature to fist it, then jumps off, but leaves it a little surprised. He summons the impaler and tries to penetrate it with his giant rod, but the dragon's too thick. So he calls Shay to come in and smash it into the ground to knock it out. Nagumo grabs his rod and puts it where the sun doesn't shine.
What are you doing? My brush is behind. Oh, that stings.
The dragon begins freaking out and begs him to pull out. He realizes that she is a dragonborn and begins to pound his rod deeper to punish the freaky dragon girl until she submits to him.
You better answer Yue's questions!
Just going in deeper. Don't force it like that. This is too much.
She says that she left her village to see the summoned heroes, but she stopped to have a rest. While she's sleeping, a mage placed her under a spell to attack the adventurers. The noble argues that she personally isekai'd his friends and is just blaming it on someone else, but Yue convinces him that dragonborn are the most noble, and as long as she placed her honor on the line, she isn't lying. The Dragonborn says she regrets her action and is ready to face the consequence, but they should hold it off till she finds the person who controlled her. Nagumo felt she had already caused him a lot of trouble, so Nagumo decides to go all the way in regardless. But Yue convinces him to spare her because she was being controlled by someone else, so she's innocent, and he vowed not to kill the innocent.
If you leave it inside me, I'll die no matter what you choose. When I transform, you'll be witness to a beautiful young woman whose buns have been skewered by this oversized metal pipe. Do you think anyone could survive that?
He decides to pull out the spike from the dragons behind, causing her to climax, and transforms to her normal form.
And yet you showed no mercy. Never have I experienced this.
Tio introduces herself and tells them that a large army of monsters are marching to attack the nearby town, and reveals that she can give them a lift after a day of rest, but she can't move because Nagumo was too rough with her.
Oh, that look makes me feel like filth personified.
So he goes over and gently carries her across the floor. In the morning, Nagumo has a meeting with the teacher and some other people to plead to Nagumo for his help. Nagumo wasn't initially happy about the fact that she's asking him to risk his life to help people he doesn't know. The teacher apologizes for asking for too much, especially when she couldn't be of help to him, but she pleads with him not to ignore people in need, especially when he has the power to do something about it. Probably due to the deep respect he has for his teacher, Nagumo decides to help out and begins making walls for defense while everyone else begins evacuating the civilians to prepare for the war. Night falls while Nagumo admires his work. Sano meets him to personally give her thanks for saving her life during the dungeon expedition, but of course, Nagumo, being who he is, couldn't even remember doing it, but she still thanks him anyway, and Nagumo encourages her not to die in the war. He also notices that the masochist pervy dragon has been stalking him, so she comes out and begs him to make her join his party while his harem watches. The army of monsters arrives. Nagumo turns on Kringy mode and goes over to give the citizens a speech that gives his teacher credit for saving them and claims that he is her sword. He summons his railgun to show them what technology can do. Meanwhile, the masochist dragon was admiring the mana ring our boy gave to her so she can be useful in the fight. They begin the fight by pewing miniguns and fireworks at the poor bastards, showing them how terrifying modern warfare is, followed by a stream of magic from Tio that she turns into a burning inferno to consume them. But Yue comes in and begins playing catch with the monsters. The battle turns into a tower defense game with the creatures standing no chance against the might of the Holemakers. Tio runs out of magic and Nagumo is out of bullets, so he takes Shay on the Batmobile to go into combat to throw hands instead and gives them a mind-blowing experience. They slaughter all the creatures in their path until Nagumo confronts the person behind the attack. He tries to run, but his wolf gets one-shotted and he is taken back to the village. It's revealed that he is their classmate Shimizu, and he explains that when he went up into the mountain he met a demon that convinced him to take control of all the monsters so he can kill his teacher.
Why the hell do you have such powerful weapons? Tell me!
She takes his hands and tells him that she won't allow him to become evil, but he embraces her and put a needle at her breather. Shay probably senses someone else due to her future magic, suddenly jumps at them to take one for the team, so Nagumo no-scopes whoever was trying to escape. He goes over to Shay, but she reveals that his teacher has been poisoned, so he feeds her a potion in the most normal way possible. Then goes over to Shi and heals her. The traitor begins bleeding out on the ground, so the teacher begs Nagumo to save him. Nagumo asks him if he is their enemy, so he says that he swears to be good. Nagumo figures he's lying and did what any normal person would do when their homie is lying, and leaves her to mourn for the loss of her student. Afterwards, the harem party says the real reason why the re-isekai'd Shimizu was for the teacher's sanctity, and that he really cares for his teacher. Our party returns the noble to his home, and they go to their room where Shay reminds Nagumo that he promised to take her around town. But he notices that they're being watched, but he's unbothered, saying he doesn't care even if it's a god that's after him, as long as they're his enemy. He would take them out. This made Tio reminisce about her tragic past of her father's final moment, saying the gods are strong but they aren't indestructible, and there would come a day when someone who has the ability to defeat the god would appear. It also appears the reason Tio left her village is because she and the other dragons could sense that someone being summoned to their world. In the morning, Yue gently wakes up Tio, while Nagumo and Shay goes out on their date. They see an aquarium and goes in to see the fugly fish. Nagumo has a heart-to-heart with the unfortunate creature, and it reveals that he was captured and imprisoned, so they sneak it out. The fugly gives them info about leaf traders kidnapping creatures. They also kidnapped a little merfolk, so they should be careful. They continue the date into town where Nagumo senses someone under his feet. They go down and find a little merfolk in the filth. They bring her to a room where Shay bathes and feeds her. Then Nagumo comes in to dry her hair. She reveals to them that she was kidnapped by slave traders and sold on the market. Nagumo carries her to the city guards and decides to leave her in their care, which she wasn't too happy about. But while walking away, an explosion in the distance catches their attention. They head inside to see a note asking for Nagumo to bring Shay to them or the little one gets hurt. So he decides to give them an ass beating. Yue and Tio sits having lunch until Nagumo and Shay makes a dramatic entrance. He tells them what happened and reveals that they're going to visit every gang until they find the culprit. Our party goes around condemning everyone they find to an early visit with God, until Nagumo finds the boss and gives him a few more holes. He frees Mayu and embraces her so he can bring her above the city and shows her the beauty of fireworks. He introduces her to his vampire lowly wife and the party. Nagumo's cute interaction with Mayu leads his perfectly legal lover Yue and the rest of the party to request for Nagumo to put one in them. And they head off on the road with Shay taking the lead and giving them a view, enough view to make Nagumo feel like ramming her, until they reach a town. They go to visit the guild leader and gives him a note, but an adventure suddenly bursts through the door. It's revealed that he is Nagumo's classmate Endo, so he goes over and begs him to save the other adventurers left in the labyrinth. He explains that while they were exploring, they were suddenly confronted by a demon. The demon recognized Aminagawa as the hero and asks him to join them. He refuses, so she summons monsters to knock them down, but Kaori comes in to heal everyone. They all began fighting back against the demons, but the demons were too strong, and they were only able to barely survive the onslaught. Shizuku tells her classmate Endo to sneak out and call for help. He reaches the knights and tells them everything that happened, but he was followed by a monster, so the knight sends him to the surface while they hold it off. After he left, Aminagawa limit breaks and manages to take down one of her monsters. The demon uses a spell, so they put up a barrier to block it, but she summons some pussycats to go over and penetrate the barrier maker. Aminagawa dispels the shadow, but finds that she's already dead. He gets up to get revenge, but Shizuku slaps some sense into them and they begin to retreat. While they were arguing among themselves whether to surrender or not, the knight suddenly arrives and tells them to do whatever it takes to survive as the monster comes in to give him an early retirement. Aminagawa prepares to go all out and slays another monster, forcing the demon to put up a shield, but he strikes through and goes to end it. He stops because she has a family and she takes the chance to summon a horse to knock him away. Shizuku fights it in a one-on-one, but another appears to blow her back out. Kaori goes to her with the barrier maker's assistance and decides that they will leave this world together. The Minotaur break through the barrier, but it gets made into a shish kebab as Nagumo appears on the battlefield. The rest of the party comes down as the monsters get ready to be slaughtered. The demon makes a portal, but he spawn camps the monster and begins showing her the power of modern warfare. He does a devil may cry and makes all her monsters become a hashtag. Our boy was showing off a tad bit to his classmate. The mighty turtle uses hyper beam, so he takes out his shield and reflects it at the demon to take out the bird, then decides to feed the great turtle some fireworks. The classmate who was the cause of Nagumo's whole predicament couldn't believe he was still alive and was making a ruckus until Nagumo's wifey shuts him up. Some monsters tried attacking the others, but Nagumo's party members show them that they aren't the same as the cannon fodder classmate. The demon spawns a monster near Kaori and Shizuku, so Nagumo gave Shizuku a custom-made blade to deal with them. The demon feels fear and tries to use magic on him so she can make her escape, but Nagumo blocks her path. After realizing she's beat, she loses her will to fight, so Nagumo decides to kindly ask her why she tried to attack them. Nagumo reveals that the only way they had someone who could control all these monsters is if someone in the demon side cleared a labyrinth. She says that someone else gave her all the monsters and told her to attack them, and declares her lover would have revenge for her, so he decides to send her on a journey. Aminagawa begs for her life, but mercy isn't in Nagumo's vocabulary. They come over to Nagumo where Kaori begins crying and apologizes for not saving him. He tells her that it's alright and she begins to embrace him. Of course, the other harem are not too happy about how close the two of them are, all except the pervert. They continue on their journey while Aminagawa begins questioning why he had to smoke her. Nagumo says he shouldn't project his worldviews into it, especially since he hasn't experienced half of what he has, and that anyone who stands in his way will get a free ticket to heaven, even if they were his classmate, and walks away from them saying the only reason he even came was cause he owed Kaori a favor. They leave the dungeon, so Kaori decides it's time to go over to him and joins his party, then expresses that she loves him more than anyone in this world. Nagumo reveals that he's more into prison charges, so he can't accept her feelings.
I'm still coming with you. I know you can't love me yet, but one day you will see me that way. After all, there's no one in any world who loves you as much as I do.
Yue accepts the challenge to show her that she loves him more.
By the way, I've been meaning to ask you about this pop-up business. Is this girl really your daughter, Hajime?
Nagumo tells Kaori that they'll be leaving soon, so she says goodbye to her old party and heads off to begin her new journey with Nagumo in the Hairmobile. Fortunately, this isn't the end, as there are more things to find out. Does Nagumo end up fighting the gods of this world? Are there more evil classmates? Does Nagumo lose any of his party members? Or does he gain more harem? Stick around to find out in the next part.